Ja, wir wieder. Heute soll es
Welcome back.
den
Today we are talking about the difference between the D1 and the D2,
Wesensmerkmale des D1
the main features of the D1 and therefore of the D2 as well are enough information to fill a video of its own. So today we will only be talking about the differences. But yeah, of course, I can talk about that for a long time. Very short history. In 2005, the D1 was developed, and because I had a few horses that needed so much shoulder freedom that there was nothing on the market that was suitable for them, I just started cutting some holes and adding some bits here, removing pieces there, and thus the D1 was created. And I traveled all across Europe trying to find a manufacturer that would build this crazy idea, and I came to Prestige eventually. All the others declined, but Prestige said, yes, we can do it, you pay for it, you can build it, or we built it. And that's what we did. And now we have the D1, and it's been around for 15 years. And the D2, let me get this straight right away, the D2 is not a replacement of the D1. Both saddles are sold at the same time, and they both have a fan base each. And because there are differences between the two, it is absolutely necessary that we have them both. And I would like to explain the key differences, but before I do that, let me get into some things that they have in common first. So D1 and D2 both have the shoulder freedom, and that is something that is absolutely unique on the market. A few competitors have tried to copy it, but not successfully, because it's not just about the holes here, but it is about the balance of the entire saddle. So these holes are allowing the shoulder blade of the horse to slide under the saddle. This results in a bigger wither size that, please do not confuse that with the gullet width. That is the distance between the two ends of the saddle tree, and the wither size is panel leather saddle tree combined, how it feels for the horse. And because these holes are positioned directly under the or below the ends of the saddle tree, it makes the wither size bigger. So if I have a gullet width of 33, if I combine it with the panel, we'll end up at 34.5-ish. And this means I have a lot more room for the horse and, a bigger wither size. It does have side effects though. Firstly, if the saddle can no longer support itself in the front, D1 and D2, what we have here is that the length of the ends of the saddle tree is a lot shorter than it is in saddles that have a gullet plate. This saddle does not have a gullet plate. It has a sturdy, thin synthetic tree, and the saddle starts nodding up and down. This is how it's supposed to be when the horse is standing still, but obviously we do not want that when the horse is moving. So we need to give it support somewhere. And conventional saddles get that support by propping up against the area around the trapezius muscle, or worst case even against the shoulder, but this is not a good thing. If you then combine that with a front girth strip, with the D1 and the D2, this strip is elastic, but usually it isn't. I fasten the saddle and I tie the withers together with the sternum. And this is the area of a horse that should be able to move freely to the absolute max. Earlier we had that straight foreleg, we didn't need it as much, but today the horses move like cats. If you ever saw a horse freely once, and you know how amazing this looks. And then you tie it together very tightly because you want to do dressage. And then you will be looking for a saddle that allows you to sit so deeply, or you choose a riding style, spurs or whip, or put your hands in the air, anything. You'll be looking for anything that allows you to create as much pressure in the back than this system creates in the front, because you want your horse to move like it would move if it wasn't wearing a saddle. And you notice that this is not smart and it is not healthy. And this is why we tried to create the effect that you have with very old, worn-out saddles. And in some professional stables, you even see people riding horses with these old saddles, because the horses love it. You put a lambskin under it, or a little cloth, or a gel pad, and this old saddle, and the horses are so happy. And then you bring the horse a new saddle that has been fitted very well to the standing horse, and then your horse doesn't want to move anymore at all. I'm sure many of you know this problem, and this is why we decided we'll make a saddle that is wider. We'll make a saddle that does not fit the standing horse, because we assumed, or we knew, that the horse that moves is 1 or 1.5 sizes bigger in terms of wither size. And this is what the D1 does. As I said, there will be a separate video with more detailed information. But let's talk about the differences now. So the D1 has been successful for many years, and if you look at the position of the stirrup bar, that is the metal bit where you attach the stirrup leather to. So the stirrup bar was moved a little bit back, so that especially women have more room in the front for their pubic bone, that they do not experience any pain or chafing. At the same time, the seat is relatively flat, but the upwards curve also starts very early. So the distance between where you have your seat bones and between the stirrup bar is actually very short. So you do not have a lot of room to find your balance. And this can be very challenging. And if you have a horse that swings a lot, of course it's easier if you sit back and if you use gravity to help you sit down. But here, you actually need a lot of fitness and tension in order to move with the horse. Or you need a horse that does not move as strongly and doesn't swing as much. But this is a point that has been criticized about the D1. And we had a few people, especially women, telling us that my horse moves so good with this saddle, and I'm very happy, but it is so exhausting. And then at some point they try a different horse and a different saddle, a conventional saddle, maybe even a prestige saddle that is more traditionally. And maybe that even has a long gullet plate and a deep seat, and thus is also longer in terms of relative length. Where you sit in the saddle is very far back. And they sit down and they were like, oh, finally I'm able to sit down. And sometimes you have horses that are loving these anatomically very modern saddles, but then you have a rider on top that is very stiff and not sitting in the saddle very well. So the horse does not actually walk that well with the super modern D1. But if you then have a saddle that anatomically is a lot worse, but the rider can sit in the saddle with a much better balance. So the horse will walk actually better with that worse saddle, because the package of rider and saddle feels better for the horse. And this problem is much more common in women than it is in men. And we were like, we need to find a solution for this. And the solution that we came up with was we need to help the riders find their balance. So a trend in the market is making or taking the saddles in at the waist and work with recessed stirrup bars. And then we have the zero technology that makes it a little bit soft here, so it's easier to press into it with your thighs. And this was a massive improvement, but as I just said, pressing means actually pressing, clenching, squeezing, and this is something that women have to do in almost every type of conventional saddle. And the way out is getting a bigger seat so they can slide back with their butt or use the blocks for support or sit in a fork seat. But actually sitting relaxed in a saddle is very difficult for women, because the saddle trees that are on the market right now almost exclusively are made for men. And the German riding theory of 1912 is an army regulation made for men like me, pre-selected for the military with bow legs, and the center of gravity is in the shoulder area. My seat bones are close together and they are straight and they are long. My pelvic floor is not flexible at all. And as a man, you sort yourself out, a right or left side, and then you're sitting on the horse. You open up the thigh, you open up your knee, you can reach the horse with your calf, and then you start riding. This is how a man sits on a horse. This is a man or a male pelvis. And if I place it on the D1, and yeah, he's sitting there. And there is not a lot of movement in the front. And we have the tailbone. He can sit like that. He can sit like that. There will always be room in the front. No problems here. So this saddle is working really well for a man. And then we take the pelvis of a female, and women make up 99% of the market in 2020. And so things have changed since 1912, but funnily enough, not many things have changed when you look at the saddle trees. Most patents are from the 40s, 50s, and in the 80s there was an English manufacturer that got a patent for a 21-inch saddle. But there is not a lot of stuff available for women or for modern horses or people. So this is my female client who wants to ride. And I can see that the pubic bone is super close to the pommel, so she needs to slide back if she doesn't want any pain. And then imagine the seat bones are elastic, so we have the elastic pelvic floor that starts after puberty, and as you get older it gets more and more. We have a lot of movement there. And the distance between the seat bones is also 3 to 6 centimeters bigger. So the whole system here is a little bit wobbly, and we are so much closer to the front. So if the woman does not want to experience any pain, she needs to close her thighs, which is why the Zero Technologies helps a little bit, because it makes the clenching easier. And there are many examples in professional equestrian sports. Many people are named as an example for excellent posture on a horse, but if you look at them more closely, you can actually see that they do not sit on the horse that well. And this is the situation that has been causing our problems, and we try to address that problem and find a long-term solution. And we tried to think about how can we solve this problem. So one problem was the pubic area. That is too close to the pommel. But we still have the elastic pelvic floor. We still have the pelvis that is wider in women. We still have the center of gravity that is in the hip area for women and not in the shoulder area. We have different angles for the thighs because there's no external rotation in the pelvis. And we'll find out that smoothing things out in the front or adding some cushioning for the pubic area, whatever, would be fighting the symptoms and not actually addressing where the problem is coming from. So we decided to go for it, and I worked together with my wife, who is a successful dressage rider herself. And we tried to create a saddle tree that is suitable for women as well, which is when the unisex ideas first started to form. So we took a pelvis that was sort of a mix between a female and a male body, and we used a computer simulation and then asked the 3D printer to print us a saddle tree. And this is how the D2 came into being. This is our man. We'll place him in the saddle. And the man is still able to sit in the saddle. He can take different positions. Nothing really changes for him. He is still feeling comfortable as he did in the D1. And now I have my woman that I place in the saddle. And now both her seat bones are on the saddle tree because the saddle tree becomes wider earlier, and the membranes inside the tree allow the seat bones of the female pelvis to sink in and give it some stability sideways as well. And then we made the front area flatter, and you can see that there is now more space between the pubic bone and the pommel. So now a woman also has the possibility to sit as close in the front of the saddle as a man. And if you now compare the two pelvises, you can see that there is a difference in the point where the seat bones meet the saddle tree. So women sit closer to the back, which is why we moved the stirrup bar to the front. So the woman that has now more space in the front is actually able to slide a bit forward. And we have now achieved the same sitting position in a woman that a man has. So we have the first real unisex tree. And this is working great. It's amazing. And the women that have tried it, no matter if they tried the D2K like we have here, or the double flap, or the D2 free, they all have such amazing reactions, and I'm a little bit sad that I cannot experience what they feel. But yeah, it's amazing to see how impressed they are. And then we have side effects to this as well. One is that when I make the tree so wide that I can fit a woman in it, the saddle becomes wider as well. And we have, as you can see, a super wide panel here. But this is a great side effect because it allows us to distribute a lot of weight on the horseback, and we have a nice wide channel here, so allowing us to distribute the weight of the rider on the back of the horse without damaging the ribs or anything. And then there's also the fact that women, as well as men obviously, can do in the D1. In the D2, women can sit back and they can open up their thighs and reach the horse with the calves instead of clenching their thighs together. And this makes such a difference that those affected are absolutely amazed and happily use the D2 from then on. And then obviously if the D2 is so amazing, why do we still need the D1? And I have to remind you that there is different types of horses as well, and this wide tree is not necessary if you have horses that have a very round costal arch, so Haflinger horses, fjord horses, Frisian horses, any horse that is used for dressage, or Baroque horses, they have very round ribs, so the D1 is better for them because you get closer to the horse here, and the D2 would be too wide. And these are the varieties that we need in order to meet every demand on the market, which is why it's important that we continue to sell both saddles. To sum it up, the main difference between the D1 and the D2 is the saddle tree. The saddle tree that allows the rider to sit closer to the front because the stirrup bar is shorter. The saddle tree that allows a female rider to achieve the same balanced sitting position that a man can achieve. And depending on the type of horse that you have, depending on how round the back of the horse is, some horses are a little bit pointy, some horses are wider. And if you have a wider horse, we get almost 30% more contact surface. So that is less pressure per square centimeter on the horseback and on the muscles. And this is an effect that obviously the horses enjoy very much. So these are the key differences. We are making something exclusively for the D2 at the moment, not yet for the D1. But if you have a Velcro block, you can just swap it. We have now preformed blocks that are elastic and they are curved. And in the K model, they are integrated, but for the double flap saddles, you can get it as a Velcro block. And it has been patented recently, actually. And the idea behind it is that you, from day one, can model the horses as they are, especially if you have a thicker model. You do not get these weird bumps in the front, but the panel follows the block, so you can preform it. And this is such a great tool that is at the moment exclusive for the D2, but it is really great, and I am surprised by how well the horses react to it. So these were the main differences between the D1 and the D2. Both are great saddles, but I encourage each of you to try what works best for you, and there's nothing more modern on the market.